Let's go way up west and talk about this lovable character, Francis Colacurcio. Colacurcio. He was alleged crime boss. My lawyer told me to say that, of Seattle, Washington, for decades and decades, allegedly. He started out as an enforcer for the crime organization that they had in Seattle. It was a small thing. His father was a part of it. His father brought him in. He rose up through the ranks, and when the boss of the organization died, Colacurcio brought in his brothers, strengthened his positions. And then in the 1970s, he was involved with a civil war with this other flamboyant gangster, this guy named Johnny Carbone. That ended with them both being indicted. However, Colacurcio did come out up on top. And by the way, if I ever enter the gangster business, I'm going with a name like that, Handsome Johnny, yeah, well-hung Johnny, something like that, Let's get some good publicity out of it. So Colacurcio got 16 years in prison in 1972. During that war, he was, slight shootout he had with Carbone. Sal Bonanno came up to Yakima, Washington to see if his family could help out with Carbone. In 1991, he was indicted for tax evasion with his son, Frank Jr., and one of his top guys, Nick Furfaro. He got 10 years for that one. And then he broke his parole, and they sent him back until 2000. He was released and went on back he had a lot of strip clubs. He was big in the strip business up and down the West Coast, and he acted as a consultant to his strip clubs. How do you consult on a strip club? These people. In 2003, he was involved in what was called Strippergate up there, and him and his son again. And Washington's former governor, Albert Rossellini, were caught trying to bribe members of the Seattle City Council. There's some who speculated that Rossellini, the ex-governor, believe it or not, was actually the head of the family up there. I don't know. It doesn't sound... I don't know. I don't know if the federal government would have allowed something like that. Charges came down to 2005. 2006, a judge strangely dismissed the whole case against Colacurcio, his son. This guy killed Gil Conti, who worked for them. The governor wasn't charged or fined at all in the investigation. Miracles do happen, see? And then in 2006, the FBI figures, we just got to get rid of this guy. Enough is enough. And they started a multi-agency task force just to investigate him, just to get him. Nothing much came of it. Then the Supreme Court justice, local Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court decided right after the FBI opened up their case that the state could reinstate the previous charges against Colacurcio Sr., his junior, his son, Conti. All they had to do was charge him with money laundering and political corruption. So the governor, Albert Rossellini, once again, remarkably, wasn't charged or fined. They dragged it out for quite a while. Colacurcio got sick. He died at age 93 of heart failure, mazel tov, in 2010. Let me go over his record for you real quick here. 1943, he's convicted. He's 25 years old of carnal knowledge with a teenager. 16 months in prison for that. He entered the jukebox, cigarette, and vending machine business in the 1950s. There are allegations from legitimate rivals, that he used threats to control the trade, that he eventually did control. He was labeled in 1957 by the U.S. Senate Committee, the McClellan Committee, as a racketeer in organized crime. 1962, he was known to have an interest in several bars, restaurants, nightclubs at the Seattle World's Fair, including a massive beer garden that was there. 1965, he introduced go-go dancing to Seattle at the Firelight Room in downtown Seattle. Firelight Room was a really well-known place in those days. He was convicted in 1969 of assaulting a former bartender who was working as a police informant. 1971, he was found guilty of federal racketeering conspiracy for running illegal bingo games. Doesn't that seem stupid to you? He did 25 months in prison for that, illegal bingo. Prosecutors showed that he was paying off and extorting people, and the police were basically paid to look the other way. 1974, now that's terrible, I know, the bingo thing. In 1974, he was convicted for income tax evasion. It was overturned on appeal. 1981, he's convicted of tax fraud from one of his strip club operations. He served 2.5 years in prison. This guy's done a lot of time in prison. I mean, even if he did live to be 90-something, still. 1984, he's the subject of a 2-day law enforcement conference in Las Vegas, run by the FBI, and 12 Western states attended. In 1987, excuse me, Arizona indicts him and a lot of his relatives for profit skimming and topless bars across the state. In 1991, he pleads guilty to a tax fraud case that they draw up in Alaska. There was strip clubs up there. He's sentenced, listen, 2.5 years. Again, his son, Junior, also pleads guilty. 1995, he's sent to prison for 2 years after violating his probation by fondling a woman applying for a job at one of his clubs. This guy. In 1995, he must have been in his 70s. 2005, again, Mazel Tov, but he shouldn't do that. 2005, he's found guilty of a misdemeanor. He's, again, groping a strip club waitress. The conviction's overturned on appeal. The state got it back. He was awaiting a retrial on that one. He was charged with his son, 2 others, for illegally funding campaigns to candidates across the state, trying to influence the state Supreme Court. This guy, that's where your tax dollars go, by the way. I mean, there's nothing romantic about this clown at all. That's why we have slums, we have bad highways. We've got to put a lot of money to keeping track of bozos like this.
Hey, Brian, just a heads up. Now that I'm an Italian mob boss, I may be treating dogs more roughly.
Okay.
Now, where's my chicken parm from last night?
Oh, I ate it.
You ate it?
Yeah, there was no name on it. It was just sitting there. Is there a problem?
No. No problem. I'm gonna have it with my last can of cream soda.
Actually, I finished that too.
That's okay, Brian. Let's take a ride and get some at the grocery store. Pull over here. I gotta take a leak. Leave the gun. Take the cream soda.